everybody. Welcome everybody to the Gluten-Free Cooking Immersion Masterclass. So I'm really passionate about this because this is what I do every couple of weeks. I'm always making my own gluten-free products. I don't eat a lot of grain per se, but when I do, I like to have clean, organic, good quality grains. And you know what? In the supermarkets, we've got the gluten-free products are some of the unhealthiest actually, because it's because they're trying to make a non-gluten product taste like a gluten product. So they're putting in all the fillers and the thickeners and the additives and the synthetic stuff, and it's just quite terrible. So if you're actually celiac, you have an autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's as an example, or you just have an inflamed gut and you're trying to go gluten-free, having store-bought gluten-free products aren't necessarily the best way to go, especially if you're reliant on that as your staple, because it's only going to make you feel worse over time. So let's get into it. Is everyone ready? Has everyone got their ingredients?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to do 2 different types of bread, but through this process, I'm going to explain how you can make so many variations on this theme. So many variations on this theme. So sometimes the ratios, you just kind of nail it and you go, oh, that is fantastic. I'm now in that rhythm where I don't really need to follow a recipe. I just kind of go by feel. And that's what I wish for everybody here. And it's about just practice and getting to know your ingredients, and then you'll become masterful at it, right? So I'm going to pop it on speaker view. Here we go. All right, here we go. All right, so first of all, we're going to do like a walnut and fruit style bread, okay? So I only created this bread this week, and because typically I don't have dried fruits, but you know what, every now and then it's really nice, or you might have some guests over. It goes beautifully with a cup of tea. It's winter time, so it's kind of like I think it's like a great opportunity to just showcase some gluten-free cooking if you've got friends or whatever coming over. So yes, Annie,
are we making with you? Are we doing what you're doing as you're doing it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. So ask any questions, right? So as you can see, I've got my computer set up in a kind of tiny part of the kitchen, so I'm kind of squashed in one end so that you can see what I'm doing, right? Okay, so we're going to start with turn the oven on, right? Everyone turn the oven on, and just to 100, right? So it's a really low oven. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that later on, okay? The other thing I'd like you to do is boil the kettle, but not for very long. Like, it doesn't need to go to boiling, just so that the purified water that you're using.
What are we putting in there? How much water? How much water, Meg?
Oh, just 600 mils. Just fill the kettle up. You can always add more. But essentially, we're going to be making 2 breads, so it's 300 mils of water for each loaf, okay? So you can fill that up, and basically I've already boiled mine, and you don't want to put all the boiling water in. So the idea is you just want lukewarm water. So this is for the yeast mixture, okay? So you only put about a couple of inches of the hot water to cold water, because essentially you want it to be lukewarm. That's really important, because if you use boiling water, which I've done in the past, you will literally kill the yeast, yeah? And you don't want to kill the yeast, because then you're not going to have any rising agent, all right?
I missed all that, so I was getting my water.
Yep. Okay, so essentially, Leanne, you just want lukewarm water, not boiling water for the 300 mils, right? And so it's about that much water. per loaf of bread, right? You can just stick your finger in there, make sure it's lukewarm. Mine's actually not quite warm enough. Right. And to that, you're just going to add a spoonful of sugar, any sugar, doesn't matter. Just a teaspoon, just a level teaspoon, right, of sugar. And you're going to add your sachet of yeast, right?
It's going to be coconut sugar because I don't have any other sugars.
Any sugar.
So how many teaspoons?
Just 1 teaspoon of sugar. Shell, I'll get you to repeat what I'm saying, if that's okay, so I can just continue on, roll on, yeah? She's there. All right, so basically pop the yeast in, and you just want to...
How much yeast?
A sachet. So you just want to...
I don't have sachets, I've only got a tin.
Okay, so one heaped teaspoon is about 7 grams. Okay, and just vigorously...
Is it about 500 ml?
300 mils of water.
Okay.
So if you've got a cup, the cup is 200 mil, and then just add, like this is 250 mil, and I've just kind of estimated another 50 mil. Yeah. So 300 mils, give or take. Doesn't need to be completely exact.
Still waiting for the kettle to boil.
Oh, okay. Just it should be boiled. You should have enough hot water from that. Yeah. So just grab that now. And essentially just make sure that the sugar and the yeast and the water has mixed through, and then just leave that to rest for 10 minutes, roughly. And meanwhile, you can start getting your fruit and nuts organized, right? So while that's just sort of sitting there, you're leaving it to sit so that the yeast can feed off the sugar and start to ferment. And what you're going to get is you're going to get a foamy head, just like the beer head, you know, of like a schooner of beer or whatever, right? So that's what you're aiming for. So you just leave that to do that. And with the fruit, when I did this the other day, I used 230 grams of mixed fruit, right? So I used dates, sultanas, raisins, currants, and goji berries. But you could use whatever you like. And today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to add in some Turkish figs and some apricots, and I'm not going to put in the currants. Okay, and the reason for that is I've got some apricots that are sulfur-free, so I really want to put the sulfur-free ones in because I don't do well with a lot of sulfur, and I feel that there was probably too much of, you know, sulfurized fruit in my other bread that I made. The other thing is once you cut up the fruit, you can actually just pop it in some hot water just so that it can soak, so that it can kind of plump up and then be combined well within the bread. And the other point I'd like to make is the ratio that I used, I just made it up, and it actually, I felt that it worked really well. If you want a really densely, a dense bread, you can add more fruit. I would add probably at least another 50 grams if you want it to be really, really fruity. Likewise, if you want it to be less fruity, you just add less and just add more nuts, right? So there's really no major rule there, yeah? Okay, so.
With the water,
yeah,
to plump it up, hot water or cold water?
Hot water. So get your scales ready and just put any combination of fruit in to make up roughly 230 grams, yeah? So I'm putting in some dates. Got these Turkish figs that I'm putting in. I saw them and I thought, oh, that'll be good. A couple of those in. I'm putting some apricot. And I've got some goji berries. Oops. Actually, we're going to put in some sultanas. And I think that's about, I might just put a few raisins because I've got a little bit more space. A few more raisins there. Oops. Okay, so I've got about 250 grams there, and I'm just going to leave it like that. All right. That on the chopping board, all ready to chop up.
How rough are we chopping them?
Just whatever, you know, there's no rules, but just, I would say, probably about that size for the dates, like 2 sultanas size for the dates, because you don't want them too big. But, you know, you could actually leave bigger chunks. It would just be quite tasty. And then it's like hot luck, who gets a nice, tasty, plump chunk of date, you know? All right, so then I'm just going to, so I'll chop that up first. So I've really not prepared anything prior so that I can do this with you guys to show the time frame and really what it takes. So normally I will cook 2 loaves of bread at once, but today I'm just doing one after the other. But it's, once you get to know, it's really easy, and you just do it and then slice it up, pop it in the freezer, and then you've got lots of gluten-free bread for the next however many weeks, right? My tip is to freeze it, because if you don't freeze it, it's not going to last, and it will go really hard within a couple of days because it's got no preservatives. So if you freeze it, then you always take it out, and it'll always taste fresh. What's everyone putting in their breads today, fruit-wise?
Just some dates and some blueberries and some raisins.
Oh, yeah. What about you, Annie? Or Anne?
Nah, call me Annie. I'm putting in some apricots, some dates, which really need to be used up by the look of them, and some currants.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent. Whoops. Okay.
And I've stuck with 230. I don't want to go over the top because I'm
Okay, no worries.
I prefer to go on minimal,
Yeah,
not
definitely.
maximal on the dried fruit.
Yeah, I'm actually inclined to agree, but because that's just what it was, I thought go with it, see what happens. Okay, all right, so then you can actually just pop them in a bowl. I've got
How much water do you add with them?
Oh, just to cover so that everything can be, just to cover so that everything, you know, they can have the opportunity to plump up. Hi, Leonie, how are you going?
Here. Right, thanks. Sorry, I'm a bit late.
I've already started. Have you got are you actually cooking with us today?
I'm just watching today. I've got
Oh, okay.
about a lot, so I thought I'd watch.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So I'll just pop it there, keep you on mute, which is great. So what we've done, Leonie, so far is we've just created the yeast mixture. So basically 300 mils of water, which is lukewarm, with 1 teaspoon of sugar and a sachet of yeast, or 7 grams of yeast. Stir it up really, really quickly and then leave that to sit. And it's almost been about 10 minutes, and see how the foam, the yeast is actually feeding off the sugar. So we want that to sit and just kind of ferment while we're doing the next step, which is basically chopping up whatever types of fruit. So we're doing a fruit and walnut or nut bread, and then we're going to do a different type of bread, which is, you know, a more plain one. Actually, it was going to be plain. I've decided I'm going to put some other ingredients in just to show you guys how easy it is to just change it up on the hop, right? So this is about empowering you to just use what you've got in the cupboard, right? So, sorry, just washing my hands. Yeah, so with the fruit, and you'll get the ingredients list as well and the recipes, but with the fruit, I've got 250 grams here of mixed Turkish figs, dates, sultanas, raisins, apricots, yeah? And then just pop, well, this is kind of lukewarm water now, water over it just so that they can plump up nicely. And then just let this sit while we're doing other stuff. All right. How's everyone going? Ready for the next stage?
Yep.
Okay, great. So walnuts I'm using. And got about 80 grams of walnuts. Okay. That's what I put in the last one. I'm going to pop in 100 grams today because I felt like the last one could have been a little bit more walnutty. Okay.
I was thinking of doing walnuts with a few pistachios too.
Yeah, pistachios would be nice. Really anything, but walnuts and dates typically go well together.
I was thinking of doing some pecans as well.
Yeah, pecans would go well really as well. Absolutely. All right, so with the whatever nut you've chosen, just roughly chop them up.
How many grams again?
I'm using 100 walnuts. In the recipe, it's 80, but I feel that it can be a bit more walnutty. So I've decided to put in another 20 grams. Right, so I've just like roughly chopped these up. Just show you here. Whoops. So it's just rough.
Can you show again, please?
Sorry. Oops. Oh, yeah, there we go. It's on speaker view, so. All right, here we go. Right. Okay, so that's that. Yep. Yep. All right, so then set that aside. Now, we're going to basically with the bread, you've got the dry mixture and you've got the wet mixture. And then you combine them together, emulsify it, let it rest, and then cook it off. That's really the stages, right? So we've just done the bits and bobs, what I call the bits and bobs, which is like the fruit, or if you were doing a savoury, it could be some olives, it could be some pine nuts. I've done that before. It could be some rosemary, fresh rosemary from the garden. It could be some turmeric, you know, or it could be plain with some lovely hemp seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. You know, you really can't go wrong. But the what needs to be, I suppose, where you could go wrong actually is with the flowers. So we really want to get a nice balance of flowers, because if you're using the wrong types of flowers, like let's say, for example, you use half of the flour mixture is green banana flour or hemp flour, it's going to be really dense, right? So we want it to be as light and fluffy as possible. It's not going to be as light as your traditional gluten style bread, and we're not trying to create that either, right? Okay, so let's do the wet ingredients first. All right, so I'm just using this, you know, it's easy and it's not not electric, so I don't need to plug anything in. But you can use anything to just mix it up. You can use your just like a whisk thing. All right, so 2 eggs. Now I always put 2 eggs in my bread because it just adds a little bit of protein. It gives it some it's another rising agent as well. And it just gives it a good texture as well, right?
So just two.
You can 2 eggs. You can use one. I've done that before, but I typically put 2. So 2 eggs, around about 3 tablespoons of oil. Now I'm going to use macadamia oil. You can use olive oil. I've also used grapeseed oil. They're the oils that I tend to use, right? So you can use avocado oil, but I'm using macadamia oil. It's a monounsaturated fatty acid. You could also use olive oil. I've just decided not to do that for this one, right? So 3 tablespoons of a nut or seed oil, not sunflower oil, ideally, or any of those, definitely not canola. We don't want any oils that are where the seed or the nut has been grown using genetically modified crops. Okay. So 3 tablespoons of whatever oil. And then your yeast mixture, right? So see how that's got a nice foamy head now? See that? Pop that in, right? And then just give it a beat. I can do it. Right.
So if I'm just using a bowl, what am I using to beat it with?
Just a whisk or a handheld beater or an electric beater. I've just got this. It's like Tupperware from back in the day, and I just find it really simple. It's really easy, and I just use that. All right, so, or you can just use you want to emulsify it properly. So you might want to get a handheld beater, yeah. Or you can use a whisk. It just means you've got to do it for longer. That's all. All right. Okay. So just Annie, I'm just going to talk through the next stage while you're doing that. So now the dry ingredients. So number 1, I use tapioca flour pretty much in every single bread. Okay. It just gives it a lovely kind of soft, spongy feel to it. It's a really good texture to use. So I highly recommend tapioca flour. And I'm just putting 100 grams each of tapioca, buckwheat flour, and brown rice flour, right? And then with the other 100 grams, or the final 100 grams, you could use any combination. So sometimes I use almond meal, sometimes I use some hemp flour and green banana flour, sometimes I use potato flour, but essentially my 3 key ingredients for any bread is the tapioca, the buckwheat, and the brown rice flour. Now, if you've got an issue, I've got one client that has an allergy with buckwheat, so they could use potato flour, or they could actually use 150 grams of tapioca and 150 grams of buckwheat flour, brown rice flour. Okay.
Can you please go through the proportions again?
100 grams each of buckwheat, tapioca, and brown rice flour. Or if you're using Bob's Mill, red mill, just 300 grams.
Well, I've got buckwheat, so I might do 100 of that and 200 of the Bob's.
Yep, so you need 400 grams altogether.
Oh, well, then I've also got almond meal and stuff to go.
Great.
And
Perfect.
some green banana in the end.
Excellent. All right. I like to add the green banana flour from a health perspective, because green banana, it's a resistant starch, so it helps to slow down your blood sugar. It's also really, really good for your gut bugs. It's You know, it's a
Okay.
good prebiotic. So that's why I use that. All right. So, all right. I've just got to get a measuring. I've just got to get something to measure. Yeah, yes. Oh, and when you, sorry, and you ideally you sieve the flowers, okay? So with sieving them, you can just do it the old-fashioned way, which is what I do. By the way, I don't have any fancy cookware, none. I don't have a Thermomix. I don't even have a mix master. I don't have anything like that. So you can absolutely make fantastic ingredients without fancy cookware, right? So this is what I normally do. But I actually splurged the other day and I bought a sifter. All right, so that's what I'm going to use today. I just bought it yesterday. So anyway, the point is that you don't need all the fancy stuff. Oops, there it goes. Answer that. And the reason why you're sifting it is just to really combine the flours well, because you don't want bits of buckwheat at one end and bits of something else at the other end, because essentially we're not kneading this bread. The reason why we're not kneading it is because it's got no gluten, so there's no point. It just doesn't make sense.
Can I just put this in the sieve and then put it straight into the mixture? Is that what we're doing?
No, not yet. So we're just doing, we have a wet ingredients and dry ingredients, and then we'll mix it at the end later, next step. Okay, so just mix the dry ingredients together. All right. Feel free to ask any questions, Leonie, as well.
I will, but I think you've answered it already. So I'm in a really busy cafe at the moment.
Okay, no worries. All right. So there's the buckwheat flour. And, oh, that was buckwheat flour. Yeah, I use that. And brown rice flour. So with the grains, just a little note on grains. Ideally, you want to get organic. Now, I'm not beholden to any particular brand. I tend to use Chef's Choice for a lot of my products. Also, Honest to Goodness, they're really good, but sometimes you can't always get everything. So you just got to go with it. Like I just used up some macro. I don't typically get the macro one, but if I can't get anything else, or if I haven't got time to go to a health food store, you know, macro is what's in the supermarket chains, right? But ideally you want to get organic, and the reason for that is because grains are a product that are typically genetically modified and oversprayed, right? So we're just really ensuring whole health, you know, and not, because the thing is if you don't know, you don't know, right? So these types of mega crops, they're typically oversprayed and genetically modified. So when you purchase something that's organic, it guarantees that that's not going to occur. And the sprays that they use are you know, they've been approved by the organic mob, whoever they are, you know. We've just got to do the best we can, right? Okay, so because glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup, which is what they use, is actually also an endocrine disruptor. So if you have a thyroid condition, you're directly impacting your thyroid by using organic, highly sprayed foods. Okay. All right, so brown rice flour, and then
What about the baking powder?
yep, so I haven't done that yet. So that also goes in. So I do a heaped teaspoon. And with baking powder, I use Chef's Choice. This is something I highly recommend. Just get a good quality baking powder, because if you just get the typical one, I think it's Mackenzie's is the main one in the supermarket. It's got aluminium in it. Okay, so don't worry, have it now if you've got it, because you don't know until you know, right? But when you do know, you can make better choices. Okay, because what we
Heap
don't.
teaspoon.
Sorry, Megan, where'd you get that one?
I got this one from Harris Farm in my area.
Heap teaspoon.
Yep, I do heaped because I do about that much. Sometimes I put 2. Why did I put this? Let me just have a look what I've written. Oh, 2 teaspoons. So you can either do 1 heaped teaspoon or just 2 normal teaspoons. Put 2 in, you know, so it's going to rise nicely. That's just a rising agent. Yeah. Now, the other thing that you might want to put in is some sea salt or seaweed salt. Now, I love this. It's Phyco Health, and it's basically organic kelp with seaweed. So the seaweed is sourced in Tasmania. It's organic, and the sea salt is sourced in the Murray River, right? Now, this is going to ensure that you get iodine in it, right? Because we don't want to get iodized salt because that has aluminium in it, right? So we don't want to get that. We want to get naturally occurring iodine. I can see Leonie's nodding her head, so that's awesome. So you're already onto it. That's great. All right, so just I do a couple of pinches actually. It's not going to taste salty, but it's just going to give you the goods, right? Okay.
We put mixed spice as well.
You can if you like. Absolutely. Why not? That's a great idea. Okay, so you can sieve this. I don't typically sieve the almond meal because it doesn't really sieve. It doesn't go through. So you can do that at the end. I'm actually going to put almond meal in this one. Where's my almond meal? And the green banana flour I'm going to save for the savoury one, right? So sieve away.
The almond meal was part of those grams, wasn't it?
Yep, so 400 grams altogether, which includes all the dry flour ingredients. I've also done it in cups before, you know, and typically I'll just do like 1 cup of each, you know, like four cups altogether. But with this particular recipe, I did grams, and it worked quite well. All right. So for those of you who are going to be watching the recording, it's a good idea to actually cook with it, because otherwise it's going to be a bit boring while you're waiting for us to sieve and do all the things.
I'm adding fresh nutmeg and
Oh,
cinnamon.
lovely. That's a great idea. Yes. You can also add some cinnamon, ground cinnamon to this one, or some ground ginger would be a really nice one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you could also, for a fruit bread, I really love fennel, and I'm going to put a little bit of fennel in this one, just to give it that little bit of aniseed lift. Right. Yeah, the reason I want to do one after the other, so that one can start to rise, so you see what to expect, right? Because I've actually made breads where it just hasn't risen at all. Like, it still turns out, it's just not quite as nice. And that would have been because I've killed the yeast off, or I might have forgotten baking powder. Like this, it happens. It all happens. All right. Yeah. This would be fun to do in person, don't you think? But the one great thing about doing it on Zoom is everyone gets their own kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? Well, because I was thinking, oh, that's a distinct advantage. Everyone gets their own kitchen. Otherwise, you'd be sitting around watching me do this, you know? All right, so with that, obviously the seaweed hasn't gone through, so I'm just going to make sure that I get that in. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you just want to make sure you get that in. All right. Okay, so don't forget to add the almond meal, right?
Yep. Done.
Okay, I haven't done mine yet. So once you've added all of that, so you make sure you've got the flours, you've got the baking powder, right? Then you can add the wet ingredients. Oh, sorry. First of all,
The xanthan gum.
oh yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yes, add a teaspoon of xanthan gum, please. Absolutely.
A good teaspoon or a flat one?
A heaped teaspoon.
The almond meal counts as part of the 400, doesn't it?
Yes.
Did you say a heaped teaspoon of xanthan gum?
Yep. Okay, there we go. All right. I knew there was something. As I was saying, you know, you can forget something. Yeah, about that much xanthan gum. Right. Now you need to put the xanthan gum in any type of gluten-free cooking. It's a rising agent. So we really need to amplify the rising agents, right? Okay, so you just kind of mix this through, like the almond meal and the xanthan gum, which typically you'd want to sift through if you haven't forgotten it. And then ideally you want to add the nuts, right? Stir those through and then add the fruit, but drain the water off. We don't want that water. We don't need it.
So we're now adding to the wet. Are we now?
Yeah. First of all, you add the nuts, mix it through. Then you add the fruit and mix it through, and then you add the wet. Because if you add the wet ingredients first, then it's going to be really difficult to work the nuts and fruit through. Okay.
Sure.
And this, by soaking the fruit, it also will get rid of any extra sulfur, you know, that's in the dried fruit.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah. Right, so then pop that in.
When I put it, there it is.
And, you know, ideally you get sulfur-free dried fruit, okay? But it's really hard to get, and the only one I had is sulfur-free is the apricots. Right, so see how it's mixing through now? So you just want to like coat the nuts and the fruit with the flour so that it's all separated in the mixture. And then you add, make sure any spices are in there. I'm going to pop some cinnamon in.
I popped some ginger in as well.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I'm going to pop some cinnamon in. I'm just putting a teaspoon in today and some fennel seeds.
Nice.
I often use fennel. I'm just putting in about that much. Whoops. Oh no, I'm going to put double that. Yeah. Can't go wrong. All right, so make sure that's mixed through. And then add your wet ingredients. Okay.
Megan, I've put my wet ingredients in the larger bowl and my dry ingredients in the smaller bowl. Can I just add this dry ingredients to the bigger bowl?
Absolutely. Just combine them.
Good thinking. That's exactly what I was going to do, Anne.
And now just mix that with like a spoon or a spatula. Just gently, because otherwise it flies everywhere. And this is where we get to see what the texture is, and then we can decide whether to add a little bit more dry or a little bit more wet, okay? Now, mine's a little bit wet. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment when I've mixed it through. You just want to make sure you mix it properly, because otherwise you get little flour bits that are stuck to the bottom. Oh, actually, it's come together okay. It's not, maybe a little bit. Okay, see, that's the texture. Actually, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Yeah, it's you don't want it to be too stiff, but you don't want it to be too runny. Do you know what? With that, I'm just going to add a little bit more almond meal. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit more. See how much I'm putting? Probably about not even a quarter of a cup.
Can I show you mine? So you
Yes.
can tell me whether.
Yeah, so that's quite dry. Yeah,
That's
so you
mine.
might.
Mine's a different colour to yours.
Yeah, see, that's what happens. So what you could do, Anne, and also Leanne, is just add a little bit of water.
I don't know whether mine needs any water. It's fairly.
Oh, if yours is quite, it's hard to tell over the Zoom. So that's, I'll just find, that's kind of the, see how it kind of can pop off the spoon. That's around about the texture.
All right, I need more water then.
Yeah, just a little bit, just go easy. Because the thing is it's going to be different for each of us, because it will depend on the size of the egg. You know, if we've kind of, you know, put a little bit of extra this, different brands of ingredients. So
And
there are a lot of
the flour we've used as well.
Exactly. There are a lot of different factors. So we just want to make sure that it's not too runny, but not too stiff. Now you can use the electric bread beaters, but actually for this, I can tell I don't need to. It looks like it's actually amalgamated quite well. And the only reason I use them, just these ones, I just use them sometimes. Sometimes it's really hard to stir, so I just use that. You only need it for a couple of minutes. And it's just to amalgamate it. Remember, we're not kneading or anything like that. We just want to make sure that everything's thoroughly mixed together, that's all. All right, so when that's mixed together, you can pop it in a pan. So just a loaf pan. Now, these are lined with toxic stuff, right? BPA, bisphenol, and phthalates and all that type of stuff. So all that Teflon type non-stick material is actually quite toxic. So you want to make sure that you line it with non-bleached baking paper, ideally, okay? Because what we don't want is we don't want to absorb any type of environmental toxins on products into the food, because when they're absorbed into the food, guess what? It goes into our body. So non-stick cookware, I get it. It's easy. It saves time. Often you can't get loaf pans or anything unless it's non-stick. But I always always, always, always line it with a non-bleached baking paper. Right. So just like that. Super easy. And then just scoop in your mixture.
Could you hold that up again? Oh, it's too late.
Sorry. I will in a moment. Hold on. I'm getting it all over. I'm trying to do it back to front, that's why. Okay.
Does that mixture look a little bit better?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Can you have a look at mine?
Yeah, just pull, pick some up with a spoon so I can see. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Mine's a little bit wetter, but it doesn't matter. Like I've made breads where it's that, there's like a spectrum.
I added a bit more macadamia oil. And
Yeah,
put
you can
most
do
in
that
my
as
water.
well. Perfect. All right. So then just spread it evenly.
I
You
haven't
need-
done the pan yet.
That's okay.
How did you line it?
I'll just pick it up and show you. There we go. I just basically, I didn't use scissors or anything. I just, rough estimate, rip it off, stick it down, and then just pour it in. Yeah, it's just like what Leanne's doing. Now, if it's kind of slipping around, just get a little bit of olive oil or macadamia oil in your hand, rub it around the pan, and that will help the baking paper stick to it so it stays in place while you're scooping the mixture in. It's just a little trick. All right, so all right, so that's I'll just show you. That's what it looks like. Now, in your low oven, you can turn that off now. And because you only put it on 100 degrees, it's going to be a low heat. And because it's winter time, you can pop that in for it to prove, right? And you can leave that for up to an hour. I don't know, you can go and do some jobs and come back to it later on, whatever, but at least half an hour. So while that's doing that, I'm going to showcase the next one so that you will then see what this is supposed to look like. Okay?
How far to the top of the container should it be? Because I think I'm going to need to put some mixture in a different thing.
Oh, okay. Just to the top. Just to the top, it can be overflowing a little bit. Yeah, if you've got a bit more, squeeze it in. Because remember, it's not traditional bread, so it's not going to rise too much.
I've got way more.
Okay, well, if you've got another pan or just a different shape or even...
Actually, no, I think it'll be fine. Actually, I think it'll be fine.
Just kind of jam it down, All right, so I'm going to get on to doing the next one, which you guys can observe.
So did you say you turn the oven off?
Yes, turn the oven off because we don't want it to cook. We just want it to be so that's quite warm in there. You just want to kind of kick start the yeast and the rising agents, like kick it all off so that it can start to get nice and fluffy before you actually cook it. And then what you do is when you bring it out, then you turn the oven on to the temperature, which is 180 to 200 degrees, and cook it for about between 55 minutes and an hour normally. Sometimes if it's been too wet, I've had to cook it for an hour and 5 minutes. Sometimes it's ready in 50 minutes. Again, it just depends on the densities of everything. All right, so right now I'm just going to crack on with this next one, which you'll get an idea of. And I'm pretty much going to do a replica of what I've done. So first of all, I'm going to do the yeast. Got enough lukewarm water there. That's perfect. I haven't quite got enough, so I'm just going to get some tap water.
What about the coconut side of, I mean, the apple side?
Yes, so I didn't put that in the fruit one, but I'm going to put it in the savoury one. And again, it just gives it a different type of flavour. I've made it with or without. It's not like a rule or anything. There's actually no rules, except for the ratio of flours. That's the main thing. I actually forgot about that, but I didn't put it in the fruit nut one that I did this week anyway. All right, so I'm just going to put the yeast. This again. And ideally you do them together. You just need to get duplicate, double. Otherwise you're forever washing up. Okay, I'll let that sit there. So I do the eggs. And I haven't even bothered to wash anything up, so I'm just using the same types of things. I'm going to put 2 eggs in here. These eggs that I've got are really extra large, so that's probably why my mixture was a bit wet. And I'm going to put olive oil in this one.
Can you remind me of the steps and amounts as you go through, please?
Absolutely. 2 eggs. So we had 300 mils of water with 1 sachet of yeast, or 7 grams, or a heaped teaspoon, with 1 teaspoon of sugar. You mix that up and let that stand. In it separately, we're doing the wet ingredients. I've got 2 eggs. I'm going to do 3 tablespoons of olive oil. This time I'm using olive oil because I'm making more of a savoury style bread, or plain. I would do this for plain as well. But I was just outside in the yard and I could smell the scent of rosemary. So I thought, oh, I'm going to put rosemary in this one. All right. So I've got 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 eggs, and I'll wait for the yeast to foam up, right, before I actually add that in, right? And then with my dry ingredients, I'm going to do tapioca flour, 100 grams. Run out of that. So tapioca flour is also called arrowroot flour, just for you to know. Now I'm actually gonna, I've got 106, I've got 115 grams because I over poured, but you know what? I'm not worried about it. I'm just gonna let that go. Tapioca is very fine anyway. All right. And then I'm gonna do buckwheat flour, 100 grams. I went over in that as well. Never mind. Okay. Tapioca is so fine. It's very, very fine. So trust me, tie it back up or secure it, because I've actually knocked it off. And actually, you witnessed that, Leanne. The tapioca flour when I knocked it off the kitchen bench at the retreat. Right, so 100 grams each of that. And so we've got buckwheat, tapioca. Oh, and then the brown rice flour. 100 grams of that. And then I'm going to put in green banana flour. I'm only going to put 50 grams of this. And then the other 50 grams, you can put anything. You could actually, sometimes I just put another 50 grams of tapioca flour, okay? Now, I don't need to put another 50 grams in because I actually over poured in each of those flours. So I'm just putting 50 grams of green banana flour. There we go. I've over poured in that too. So, never mind. Excuse me. Okay, so quite some really good pinches of this FICO salt or seaweed salt. There's another really good brand, and that's called Tasman salt, and that's got seaweed in it as well. I'm going to pop some, whoops, I'll do the baking powder. Just do a heap teaspoon there. I'll do the xanthan gum. Now, you probably notice I haven't used the sifter. Ideally, you want to use the sifter. It will actually make it a bit better, but just for time purposes, I haven't done it this time. And I know that it's still going to work. It's just going to be a little bit more dense, and I'm okay with that. All right, so not too dense. Right, so I'm going to put fennel seeds in this one as well. Probably about a tablespoon of fennel seeds. And in this one, I'm going to put caraway seeds. Okay. And rosemary.
Can you put, what kind of seeds can you put in? What are all the different ones?
Well, I'm actually going to put in hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, and sunflower seeds as well. And sesame seeds. Yeah, they're the ones. Now, I'm just ripping this rosemary up, or you could chop it up. It's probably better to chop it up, actually, because then you'll get more of the aroma. Oh, wish you guys could smell this. Now, I'm just doing I'm putting quite a lot of rosemary because whenever you cook the herbs, it's less potent, I find. So, I'm putting 2 decent sized sprigs in.
I've got fresh thyme. Is fresh thyme all right?
Oh, beautiful. Love it. And rosemary is a natural antioxidant. It's actually really good for the liver as well. Excuse me, just got an itchy nose from all the flowers and everything. Yeah, so it's great. It's actually, rosemary is beautiful to have as a tea. Just a couple of sprigs of hot water, beautiful for you. Right, so I'm putting quite a bit, if you see, quite a bit of rosemary in there. And then you could put some olives. I'm just not putting olives in this. Just being aware of histamines on a personal level. So there we go. That's the mixture there. Now I'm just checking that I've put the main ingredients as the salt, the xanthan gum, the baking powder. I've got the flours in there. So I've got about 115, 120 of tapioca, brown rice flour, buckwheat flour, and then I've got about 65 of the green banana flour. But ideally, you would round it off to 100 and then 50. Okay. I've also put some caraway seeds, about a tablespoon, fennel seeds, about a tablespoon, and some freshly chopped rosemary. I've also put 2 very generous pinches of the FICO salt. And what I might do as well, when I actually mix this together and put it in the pan, I'm going to put some salt, do a little salt and rosemary crust on the top as well. All right. Now, the yeast mixture is pretty much ready. So I'm going to pop that in. So just pretty much doing exactly the same as what we did before.
What about the apple cider vinegar?
This time I'm going to put a splash of apple cider vinegar, just splash. No. Again, it just gives it that, it's lovely fermentation. It just gives it a slightly different flavour.
Can you go a bit crazy with the seeds and put a lot?
Yeah, you can. It's just that you might need to then add some more liquid because it might just dry it out. So the one seed, what I'd be really mindful of is not to use very much LSA or flaxseed because they are polyunsaturated fatty acids, and they hemp seeds. Yep, you can use hemp seeds. I've got got the same one, Annie. Yeah, so with flaxseed, like, trust me, it will go really goopy, and it's because it starts to absorb the water straight away, and it works, but it's just really, really hard to manage. It's like glue. It turns out okay, but also being a polyunsaturated fatty acid, it's probably not the best in terms of stability with heating either. Sunflower seeds, you can measure this out. Typically, I'll put about 3 or 4 tablespoons. I'm just grabbing my hand in here and doing that. And potatoes, same. And I'm gonna put in some sesame seeds as well. Sesame seeds are really high in calcium. It's really great for bone health, for pre or postmenopausal women. We really want to amplify foods that are going to help with bone health. I've got about 1.5 tablespoons left of that, so I'm just going to pour that in. And the hemp seed. Again, just like with the fruit and nut one, you mix that through first before adding the wet. Okay, then add the wet ingredients. And then amalgamate it. Whereabouts are you living, Leonie? I've seen you, we're connected on in the social media world, but it's lovely to see your face. I've not actually met you properly before. Right, so this here is actually getting quite stiff, and that's okay. But this is where I will swap over and grab the electric beaters or mixers. Okay, now some people have bread machine. I've just never bothered with that. But yeah, you could use that if you want to. These types of breads are like this savoury one. It's really, really good to have with like a winter type soup, you know, or just, you know, you don't have to, it doesn't mean that you're eating a lot of bread. You still go minimalistic on that, ideally for a healthy, balanced diet. but every now and then it's good to put your egg on something. Don't you agree?
Totally.
Or a lathering of avocado. Like the world wouldn't be the same if you can't lather your avocado on something, you know? So that's why it's good to have these types of products. Really? To make sure that's all. Now that's pretty much all you need. You're just mixing it up to mix it through. So you just want to mix it through. Okay. Now this mixture is quite stiff, but I know that it's still going to work. I don't need to add more liquid. I'll show you in a moment. Just getting all the floury bits down the bottom. Okay. All right. So again, loaf pan ideally. Look, you can use any type of tin. I was using a square tin for ages, but loaf tin is good because then you can slice it accordingly.
Can you check the texture, please?
Yep, that's fine. That's fine. It could be a bit wetter, but mine's like that too. Right, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, you know what? You just Annie, just add a little bit more oil or water, right?
I've added a little bit of both just now. Just
Yeah,
mix it
I'm
through.
just going to as well. I've just made a decision that I'm just going to add a little bit more. I just want to make sure that it's I'm just going to mix that through. Yeah. Oh, that's better. Yeah. Yeah. Flowers, it's just difficult when it's really tacky. Okay, then chuck that in the pan. It generally just like pops in one big heap, and then you got to spread it out. Yeah, it was actually a good move adding more liquid. Otherwise it would have been a little bit too stiff. And you'll get to know as well. Right, so then just you kind of need to really, you feel like a cement mixer because you just got to like kind of, and like at this point in time, it looks like there's no way it's going to work. Trust me, it works. All right, so, but it won't work if you forget the key ingredients that are helping it to rise. All right, and I can see the rosemary there. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add, now you don't have to do this. I don't always do it, but I'm just going to add a little bit of olive oil. I'll just pop it on my hands. I'll just kind of like, white, like, I'll show you. I'm just kind of like putting it over the top. It's just like it'll just help it to brown nicely. more for visual appeal than anything else. And I've got some rosemary left here, so I'm just going to like sprinkle that over the top. That might go black actually, but anyway, too late, done it now. And I'm going to have a little bit of a salty crust on this one. The seaweed salt. So this is clearly a savoury one, or you could just omit the thyme and the rosemary and the fennel and the caraway, and you could just have a seeded bread, which is more like a plain kind of like whole, you know, like a whole grain type bread. But I quite like having these culinary herbs added and spices. All right, now that's what it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to bring the other one out. Now it started to, you might want to look at yours as well. It's kind of, it started to rise. Now normally I would leave that for a good, like another half an hour. And in fact, I probably will leave it for another half an hour. See how it's starting to rise up above, right? So sometimes it can go a good half an inch to an inch above the tin, right? So like at times I've been busy, or I've just gone and done some other jobs or whatever it is, and I've gone, oh yeah, I might just check that bread, and it's like risen about a good inch. So I'm actually going to leave this to rise, but I'll leave it outside the oven now because it's got enough heat that's given it a good kickstart. And I'm just going to turn the oven on. Pop the other one in so it can do its little thing before I turn the oven on, right? So the oven is off at this stage. So we only put it on 100 degrees to give the oven some warmth because it's winter time. In summer, you would just put a towel over it and just leave it for an hour and just let it do its thing, right? So that's the only similarity to typical bread. And the reason for that is for the yeast.
So
Okay?
Megan, sorry, I didn't know which one you were showing. That's my fruit one. Do I put that back in the oven?
No, that's fantastic. So you can leave that out now and you can
Yep.
put the other one in
Yep.
the oven.
But turn it on a little bit.
No, I wouldn't, because it's probably got enough warmth there.
Doesn't have that much warmth.
Oh, okay. Maybe turn it on a little bit then. It just needs to have a little bit of warmth just to really kick it off, and it just saves a little bit of time as well. So typically what you do now is you just leave the other one in there, or they'd be in there together from the beginning, and then leave them for about an hour and a half. As I said, there are no rules here. You can leave it for half a day if you wish. The longer you leave it, the more it will rise, and it will probably taste better, a little bit fluffier, a little bit more buoyancy. So I'm actually deliberately going to leave this a bit longer, okay? And I'm going to not put the oven on. And then when I do cook it off, what I'll do is I'll put photos up in the group chat that we've got going on so that you can see the finished product. And what I'd love is for you guys to put yours on there as well, okay? Or you can put it in, I think everyone's in my Thyroid Healthy Balance. You can put it in that group. Yeah, either or, in the chat or in the group. It's up to you. But it'd be really good to see your finished products.
So when we put it in the oven, what temperature and how long?
Yes, so good question. So I always heat up the oven to 200 degrees and then I just back it off a little bit, right? So it's kind of like 190, all right? And heat it, and then in the oven for about 50 minutes as a minimum. But you might need to push it. It's normally about 55 minutes. If it's a little bit wet, you might need to go an hour, and then you just test if it's cooked, just typical, the typical way. Stick a knife in, you know, if it's dry, it's cooked. If it's not cooked, yeah. Sometimes I've had to go over an hour, very, very rarely, And looking at your mixtures today, I doubt that you'll need to cook it for longer than 55 minutes. So as per normal cooking of anything, heat the oven first, and then when the oven's at the desired temperature, pop it in for about 55 minutes and then check it out. But you might want to put a little bit of olive oil on the top or macadamia oil. It just gives it that nice browning agent.
If I'm going to be out for an hour and a half, and so it's going to cross over when it would. So can I just leave them and cook them later?
Yes,
Or
I would
will
leave
they
them.
Drop.
Yep. No, they're not going to drop. They're not going to drop. So I would leave them. I would just leave them in your lukewarm oven while you're out.
Yeah.
But turn the oven off. Make sure you turn it off.
Yeah.
And when
cook
you come
them
back,
when I get back.
Yeah, just cook them together. Because you're cooking two things, it probably will take the same amount of time. You might need to cook it for a little bit longer. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of some variations. You could do a lovely turmeric bread, okay? In the actual fruit bread that we did, you could actually choose to put some grated apple and make it, and then you'd put less water because you'd get the moisture from the apple, and that's actually really nice. I've done that before as well. In the savoury bread, likewise, you could put grated zucchini and grated carrot, and you could have like a veggie loaf, okay? You may choose to not put the yeast in this type of loaf, so it becomes more of a cakey loaf as opposed to a bread style loaf. So in one of the recipes that I'm gifting you is a pumpkin style polenta bruschetta, and there's no yeast in that, for example, but it's a beautiful loaf to just slice off and have with anything savory. Like you could have it with your breakfast, or you could have it with soup or anything like that, or just as one slice and pile it up with lots of salad and avocado for a really healthy lunch. And it's no numbers. Yeah. And the moisture, polenta, because it's cornmeal, by the way, you can't get organic polenta. So I use polenta in cooking. I love it, but I don't use it all the time. Yeah. So I don't know whether you could actually source a good non-genetically modified polenta. I'm uncertain of that. If anyone finds out that they can, let me know. But yeah, ideally Australian grown polenta or cornmeal. And because it's cornmeal, that will absorb water really, really quickly. So just be mindful of adding more water where you need to, or detracting it. So when you're making the polenta loaf, that's why moist vegetables like zucchini work really, really well, or pumpkin. So with pumpkin, if you're using pumpkin, or if you choose to use pumpkin, cook it first. You could either steam it, I typically bake it, and then mash it through that way, right? You don't want to actually cook the pumpkin in from scratch. You want to pre-cook the pumpkin and then add it. Just like how you would make, like something with sweet potato, yeah? Yeah, so you can really go to town. And pine nuts is another really, really good one to put in. The almond meal I tend to put in the sweeter style, but it also goes really well in the savoury as well. Just put less proportion. I mentioned the potato starch and hemp flour. Now, if you're going to use some hemp flour, it's a really good, it's got a lot of fibre, it's got a good quality omega-3. But if you're going to use hemp flour, I recommend just using a small amount, because if you go overboard, it just really makes it very, very dense and very, very dark, and a bit overpowering. It becomes a little bit bitter. So just be mindful of that. Yeah, so, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, have you ever put like charcoal or anything like that in?
No, I haven't.
But just wondered whether you tried charcoal and how it went.
No, I haven't. I've not tried charcoal. What type of charcoal? Is it like a?
That's tough to find though. I mean, I bought I have had charcoal bread, and don't get a shock the next morning when you go to the toilet is my response. But it's like, what the hell? But I know it is good for helping to clear out.
It's very charcoal.
But I think it would absorb. It would need more liquid, maybe.
I think it probably would need quite a lot of liquid because charcoal, as a medicinal, it's actually really, really good at binding toxins to clear your bowel as a medicinal. So yeah, you could put it in the bread, or you could just have it as a medicinal and not put it in your bread. Yeah, I'm unsure of that, but yeah, I have seen that. That they do put charcoal in breads, but it's probably something that I wouldn't tend to do.
I think it's a bit trendy.
There's.
I did buy a loaf at Harris Farm Markets recently. It had charcoal in it, like it was very dark and dense. But to be honest, my stomach did not like it. It was gluten-free, but it was like, oh, what am I doing? So I don't know whether there's some flours I think I react to, and I haven't written down exactly which things in some of the gluten-free breads I react to. So I tend to. I still buy them, but I try and keep track of which ones suit my gut better.
Absolutely. So with that, see how you go with these ones. And I mean, look, you could have an intolerance to something. The best way to actually sort that out would be to do like a food intolerance test, which is something that I could steer you in the right direction on. It's like an IgG and an IgA, which show the delayed reactions of foods with your immune system. So that's, or it could be something to do with your digestive enzymes. Like there are so many different variables, but it's a good idea to keep track. And when you're making your own, like it may not even be the flours. It might be something else. It might be a preservative. They typically put 202, so it could be something like that.
Yeah, I do often make, there's a Thermomix recipe for grain-free, gluten-free bread rolls. And I often make those, and I'm fine with those. I mean, there's a lot of psyllium husks, so it keeps it very regular. But I don't react to those, so I know that's tick for psyllium, tick for almond meal. But then it's a matter of, I have made my own gluten-free flours before, and to be honest, it was so long ago, I can't really remember whether I reacted or not. So I need to go back to doing that again. I think taking the easy way out and buying the store-bought stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, we've spent about 90 minutes. That was a guess, by the way, with the time. But typically, you probably need about 45 minutes. And then you go and do what you need to do and then come back and then cook it off. And ideally doing 2 loaves at once because you're saving time, because I didn't wash up everything and start again. I just use the same bowls, because it doesn't really matter because it's roughly the same ingredients. So I prefer cooking in that way, otherwise known as batch cooking, because it saves time. And in this busy world, the amount of people that said, I don't have much time to make my own gluten-free bread. But actually, if you get into the hang of it, you won't need to follow a recipe, just like I'm not. And you can just, do it in stages, like do it once a month and slice it up, freeze it off. When you're freezing off your bread, the way I like to do it is I just have layers of the baking paper, so it's easy to separate. And then you just grab 2 slices out at the time. And for a balanced, healthy diet, you're not having it every day anyway, and it will actually last quite some time, unless you just get into that lazy rhythm of actually having it every day, because it is a convenience food too. So, So, the other thing that you can put in, which is something that I have not mentioned, is you could put in some legumes. So you could put in some pre-cooked azuki beans or something like that, and with some olives and rosemary, and have a real savoury loaf. that would actually be really nice as well. Yeah. Any further questions?
No.
Fantastic. So now it's time to let your breads just percolate away, and then in roughly an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, if you want to take a snap photo of it before you put it in the oven so that we can see how much it's risen, and then bake it off or preheat the oven, bake it off, and then I'd love to see your pictures and how you intend to use it. Have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for joining. Who had fun?
Thank you so much. That was great.
Oh,
And good to see
fantastic.
Leanne.
Great, thanks, Megan.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. It was good.
Oh,
Smells
excellent.
wonderful.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's something that we can't share. We can't share the smells, but at least we all had our own kitchen. All right. Have a fantastic day.
Bye, Leanne.
Bye.
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 Bye.